Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, maybe good morning for those of you out on the western part of the North American continent. I have a tradition that when I am hosting a panel that is after 6 p.m. or even when I'm on a client call this late GMT, I bring a glass of wine. So I'm drinking a Johanneshof German Riesling this evening as I host this panel of brilliant minds to talk about the future of museums and technology. So I'm going to let each of these wonderful people talk a little bit about how they are seeing the future of museums and tech. I have discussed with them some topics that we're going to talk about this evening, but of course we want to make sure your questions get answered. So please feel free to use the little Q&A or the chat, and I will be monitoring those throughout the session. And we'll ask questions as we go through. And of course, at the end, we'll have some interesting discussions where all three of our panelists will answer whatever sorts of things you're interested in. So first, we're going to start with Jane, who's the CDIO of the Cleveland Museum of Art. And if you've never been to Cleveland, I think it's one of the great underrated cities in America. I didn't discover it until my niece went to university there. And the Cleveland Museum of Art is awesome. So really happy to have Jane with us, and she's going to start off our panel. Jane.
Hi, thanks, Theresa. I have a huge glass of vodka. No, I'm kidding, it's a glass of water, but here's to you. Hi, I'm Jane Alexander, and I am the Chief Digital Information Officer at the Cleveland Museum of Art. And I was listening to Catherine Devine this morning, starting keynote, and I completely believe, and this is what I'm about, is rapidly reuse, and how she said the 21st century museum needs a 21st century infrastructure. And that has truly been our strategy for doing all we do at the museum. Next slide. So, everyone who in the museum world who's into innovation, digital, always knows us for our outward-facing digital products. But the reason we have been able to really do this is because of really our back end and how we really run everything off of originally from our digital asset management system. So when I came to the museum in 2010, it was in the middle of a huge building project, a new Vignoli edition. There was, the museum was trying to select a new collection management system for their artworks. They had recently purchased a digital asset management system just 6 months before. They were about to launch a website within the next month and had not thought about a scalable or sustainable collection online. And we had been given a grant to use physical and digital and integrate them in a way that it would give people the tool sets to look closer, dive deeper, and what became known originally as Gallery One and now as Artland. Next slide. So we had to really, I thought, wow, we have a digital asset management system. I was super excited. And it was able for our Gallery One, while we were selecting a new collection management system, I thought this would really be a great proof of concept. One of the spaces that this has not changed, and it still is dynamic as ever, was that we wanted a huge 40-foot wall that would have every object on view at all times, meaning that it would need to pull from something, because as people work in museums, objects go on view and go off view and go on loan and go to conservation all the time. And within a week, 200 objects can change. So we thought, wouldn't it be great, since the museum had been closed for the last 6 years, that you could, anything on this wall you could touch and it could save to your app, which also the app would have every object on view with all its metadata associated with it. And so we said, let's make this a proof of concept for our digital strategy and back end. Next slide. The other thing that was really great is when I came, we had the foresight to do during the building collection to digitize the collection. I was like extremely excited about this, because with a digitized collection, that's a real huge step into being, and they purchased a digital asset management system. They hadn't really thought about how they were going to integrate it or use it or could connect with our collection management system, but it was a great start. And I think that's the start. When people ask, how do we do all these different projects? I'm always asked, are you digitizing your collection, and do you have an integrated backend system? So, and we're really excited. One of our projects this year, even during COVID, is to be able to be 100% digitized of every object in our collection. Next slide. So to do this, we had to have, next slide, a fully integrated back-end system, flexible, that be sustainable and scalable. And basically, we initially started off with our digital asset management system that that would house every image and 27 derivatives within the first 2 years, because every outward-facing game, depending on what it is, needed a different derivative, be it the walls when you open it, the larger image, the phone that you could save, the smaller 72 DPI image, and et cetera, et cetera. So this actually was the beginning. We actually got much more complex, and we've created a middleware, and we connect to our ticketing and et cetera, et cetera. But this really has given us the ability to do some really fabulous things. Next slide. So right now, especially in this last year, I know 2020, we were just all talking on the panel how a lot of us want to erase 2020. I actually think it was an opportunity for museums and us, especially because we had an integrated back-end system, and there was this need that everything now needed to be online. I'm not a believer that what you do on site should just automatically translate to online. But with our back-end systems, we were able to quickly, within the first week, get every exhibition online. We were able to take advantage of all our different artists, like African artists, our LGBT artists, and everything, put different collections online. We were able to create different AI programs that I'll talk about. We were also, because we were gesture-based, we were closed for a couple of months, but we already had the foresight that we've been thinking about the digital native, and we weren't really, and we had begun to really remove the touchscreen. But all this, again, was based on, we were able to be flexible and scalable because of our infrastructure. Next slide. So over the years, Gallery One has iterated. We've had 3 different iterations, and it's always, again, about how we kind of rotate between infrastructure of the building, you know, different access points, analytics, where we're placing to gather these different data points. Then we go into applications the next year, and the 3rd year, we kind of rotate with outward facing. And we constantly rotate this so that it's always engaging. But at the same time, whatever's going on in the museum, if one of the things is, from our back-end system, if a curator or educator or someone changes anything, within 5 minutes, it reflects that same change, that it's not 1917, it's 1971. It reflects in all the different outward facing within 10 minutes of putting it in our back-end systems. Next slide. So then the other thing that allowed us open access, as most people, our digital asset management system was able to really be a strong point in this and able to put the logic in so that we could create easy ways that people could understand what open access is, download high-res TIFFs, download all the metadata or JPEG, and you would understand what we were doing. And this was, again, not the technology wasn't hard, the politics were hard. And so that's, again, led us, once we got the go, we were able to sort of do a best practice. Next slide. And also dashboards in that showing our Wikimedia views, our open access views, our collection views. We do everything we do, we share, because we believe that as a museum, we're not competing against each other. We're competing against Netflix, which has been said multiple times, but it's true. Like, we're trying to get, if families go to museums and interact with museums and teachers and scholars, like, they'll do it in every city. So by sharing these dashboards and letting people know that sharing everything we do, we can get access to other museums doing the same thing and getting us to a more standardization. Next slide. And so what's next? we want to really we believe that outward facing requires, is fun, like for us, we enjoy it, but it really requires work, and wouldn't it be great if we could share and team up together, and if we all had sort of powerful back-end systems and were API driven, just think of the things we could think of doing. Next slide. Two of the things we've tried so far. Oh, one thing is though, back to the physical and digital, this was the exhibition. It's going to be the first time we have a scholarly exhibition. This is the prototype before we close. It's going to open in November 2021, but we have a conservation of Cambodia sculptures, and 4 of the 6 galleries are going to use digital to help people understand and connect with a exhibition that otherwise would be limited to sort of a small group of people. And it's going to even start with like, where is Phnom Penh? How do you get there? And so things like that. So again, we're able to really focus on the learning goals and what we're trying to achieve, because we have a way of easily updating and having one source of truth. Next slide. Last slide, I think. Oh, so one of the other things that I was going into is we did create this Artland AI. This was kind of a fun project because we're all not in work. We're all missing that water cooler moment. We're missing the, you know, and I saw there was a contest today on the conference site about show your view. And the thing is, that was about, we were like, we're all like, college students are working from home, people are working from home, teachers are working from home, and it pairs it up with an object from our collection. And it's really fun. I ask you to do it, but what I'm also asking you to think, if your institution has an API, like what we could actually create something together and use this software to have more objects that it could match with. And that's the same with last slide. This is the last slide of Artlands for Slack. This was something we created at the very beginning. We thought it'd be fun because for workers, for working from home was going to be very different. Monday through Friday, there's a daily prompt, and our team that, you know, tests things and then we move on, we have not stopped playing it. We have organizations all over the world that every morning you get a prompt, and it has to do with what's going on in the world. You pick a choice and different objects come up, and then you write like your little caption. At the end of the day, you get a little notification, and everybody who played that day, it has the name of the exhibition, which, you know, could be happy hour or you know, whatever was going on. At one time it was about wearing your mask or new president, all those different things. And so it's relative, but it's also fun. You get to interact with people, but you really get to deep dive into art. This again is something with us all working together. We could be hitting multiple art collections instead of just Cleveland's. And thank you so much, Theresa.
Great. Thank you, Jane. I know there's chat going on and questions coming in. We're going to get through all the intros and initial thoughts from every speaker, and then we'll have the dialogue. So keep submitting your questions, and we will get to those shortly. We're going to hand right off to Neal, who's going to give his perspective. Neal, please give us some background on yourself, and then take us through it.
Thanks, Theresa, and thank you, Jane, for a really great presentation, showing all the really great stuff that you've been doing at the Cleveland Museum around it. I'm Neal Bilow. I'm the CEO of Theresa. We're one of the newer players in the market and we've built a new DAM platform to help museums and institutions as they get into more of the cloud and future-based technology around that. So I'll show you a few quick things around that if you'd like to go on to the next slide. As Jane talked with some really great visuals around the front of the house, what we wanted to talk about a little bit today was the back of the house. Around it, and you can see with the front end always looks really great, but what's going on in the back end, right, is usually a bit of a mess around all of this around it. So our thinking process around it is it time for a change? When we start to look at these technologies, we're using a lot of that, you know, continued use of legacy technologies or silos that are monolithic with a single interface. The systems and infrastructure are often on premise meaning they're hard to manage. And Theresa, just go ahead and fire through these really quickly. They have a lot of data entry focus instead of workflows or supporting those processes in mind around them. There's a real lack of APIs, or you're forced to actually build a lot of your own APIs as well. They also lack that real flexibility or extendability. Next slide, please. For those who listened to Adrian Cooper, our Chief Product Officer during the Tech Lab earlier, he said it around technology is the enabler for digital innovation. So we need to better understand and manage our digital ecosystems around that. Next slide, Theresa. And one of the ways that we're able to do that is through some modern technical architecture to serve up all of the really great customer facing or visitor facing experiences, whether they be in person or digital. And one way we can do that is to look at cloud native technologies. Therefore, they're a lot more cost effective. We're not packaging them up on servers and putting them in the cloud, which run very expensively, but instead create them as cloud native. And that's the big shift from systems to services. This allows us to have modular services, APIs to support agile integration, as well as to manage things like multiple devices in interfaces. We've heard a lot in our consultative process around how many times the question up of, can I use this on a PC? Can I use this on a Mac? Is it agnostic or anything? Those shouldn't be questions that we're asking ourselves anymore when we're thinking about modern architecture around it. Next slide, please. I'm going to ask you to go through this one quickly because this is a dense slide and available for anybody later. But this is a reimagination of what that modern technical architecture looked like with all of the systems around it, with the API gateway, workflow tools, and some business intelligence tools to all serve up all of those data analytics that we really need. Next slide, please. To do that, we need to facilitate this digital transformation through the technology by having configurable workflows, built-in flexibility, and support project-based activities. A lot of times we end up doing this on the outside or managing these types of exhibitions in an Excel and not within the DAM system as well. And that really kind of creates some blocks in the workflows. We also need to be able to enable that collaboration that Jane talked a lot about and sharing between the GLAMs. Next slide, please. And that means expanding the scope of really what DAM is around this. This means extending beyond just core kind of records and object-based activities, embracing these third-party content around it, open link data that we can bring in, and really support access and interpretation and digital storytelling within our DAM, or as a way to then push out to those tools, which will then be the public interfacing sites. And that's all through enabling some data exchange with transfer and aggregation. And finally, obviously, to enable a lot more of that metadata enrichment. Theresa, next slide. Finally, you guys may have seen this during Catherine's keynote. This is really a view of what we think that a DAM and collections management should help to be part of an ecosystem around it. And this was our reimagination of what that museum ecosystem looks like, with all of the activities and systems, all of the actions, all to get towards this corner side that's talked about engage around how do we show our collections online? How do we tell compelling stories? How do we help produce online journals? And how do we interact with the gallery interactive from the DAM? Similar to some of the things that Jane has talked about and what Susan's going to talk about next. Again, I'm going to be really quick because we want to get over to Susan as quick as we can. Theresa?
Great. Thank you, Neal. Perfect. Next, we have Susan, who is, I think, has one of the most beautiful backgrounds behind her of art and books that I've ever seen in the whole year that we've been in this virtual world. And she's going to talk to us.
I'm glad I tidied up.
Thanks. Oh, looks fantastic. Go ahead, Susan. Oops, let me just get the next slide going. There we go.
Yes, thank you.
Yep.
Well, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. I'm Susan Wamsley. I'm the digital asset manager for the Solomon R. Guggenheim Museum in New York. And I think I have sort of more of a nuts and bolts kind of approach to this question. So next slide, please. Back in March of 2020, as with everyone else pretty much, the doors to our beautiful World Heritage Site building closed temporarily. And it was necessary to pivot to a digital presence. And we were looking to engage our regular visitors, to interest new potential visitors for the future, to educate and to stay relevant. Next slide, please. Luckily for the Guggenheim, we already had the ability to connect to our invaluable digital assets from any internet connected device. All of our employees could find all of our vivid imagery, and they could repurpose our content into world-class educational material. With our dams already well positioned with an intuitive interface and efficient search index, we were able to respond to the moment. Next slide. And we launched the Guggenheim at Large initiative. And this has everything from virtual tours, it's got classes, activities, curator-led programming, past performances and events, resources for families and for educators, all of which rely on assets pulled from our dams. So when I was thinking about what is the future and museums and tech, certainly this type of enhanced digital presence is here to stay. Even after our doors open, I think these kind of initiatives and this sort of wider reach is something we'll want to continue, and something I think we've done really successfully. Obviously, having a mature dams is critical to provide all this raw material that our marketing, our education, and our interactive staff members were using to develop all of this content. And it also, they're able to respond to the moment, whether it's a global pandemic or a Bernie Sanders meme. And I was thinking about all of these, how the dams feeds all of these engaging experiences. And my focus is always, how does our dams need to function to do this? And the speed with which we need to turn around new content with a very small number of staff members. I'm a department of one for the digital asset management. This means that we need to have tools like machine learning or AI. This is really indispensable as we sort of ramp up the scale of what's coming in and what we need to produce. So next slide, please. For example, we have the Panza Collection Initiative at the Guggenheim, and it's a Mellon-funded project that's dedicated to the research and preservation of the minimalist, post-minimalist, and conceptual artworks in our collection. And these were acquired from the Panza family in the 90s. And a major part of this initiative was to interview the artists and the fabricators to determine the intentions and the wishes of the artist, because some of this work is very challenging and there are many iterations of it. So we fast forward to the last couple of years. This project's been going on for more than 10 years at this point. And we're starting to wrap up and working towards making this research available to the public. And there were hours and hours of audio and video interviews, both born digital and digitized DV tapes. And in order for us to release these interviews and for them to be useful, they needed to be transcribed, they need to be reviewed and edited. But we did not have the staff to do this manually. I noted Catherine Devine said in her keynote today that you can estimate about 4 hours of transcription time per hour of audio. So luckily, we were able to use an automated indexer, and that returned these much needed speech to text transcripts and timestamps. I think I was trying to remember exactly what it was. It was within the week, might have even been overnight. It seemed like overnight. So that was very, very helpful. Then we were able to look through them and make any sort of fine tuning that needed to happen. So then with all the information and the audio and the video files, since they were searchable by text, this really made them, that just opened this up to being able to be available for research. And I expect staffing and budget will still be an issue in the future for pretty much every museum. So machine learning and AI is definitely critical for providing these high quality searching opportunities for our users. And it's really something that we need because we have to perform all of these pivots under various circumstances. Another factor I was thinking that's sort of a hot topic at our museum is sustainability. And putting aside the kind of the energy consumption of servers, which is another discussion, I was thinking about our museum's focus on the carbon footprint related to travel and exhibition planning and execution. And here we have in our dams exceptionally high resolution images of our collection works. And as been proved in the last year, they're easy to get to and really versatile. So you can do more virtual couriering, which I know is a new trend at other museums. And these files can be absolutely invaluable doing condition checking from afar, considering a work of art as a loan, installing artworks. And if new iterations of artworks are sometimes constructed for an exhibition, so that would be another use. So I feel like this trend is something that will continue as budgets are sort of reapportioned about travel, and then also sustainable practices are more brought to the forefront for more priority in exhibition planning. So I think that the future of tech and dams is increasing efficiency by using machine learning, and then also providing an element of sustainability for the modern exhibitions. Back to you, Theresa.
Excellent. Thank you. I like the fact that we're talking about things that are important for the environment as well. So I'm going to start asking some questions, and I see that there's been a bunch that have come on. Let's have all of our panelists back on the screen there. Here we all are. I think just as a first question that I'd like to ask before looking at what our audience has been putting in is, what are you most excited about, I guess, in terms of, obviously there's so many possibilities, and you've been very diligent, both Jane and Susan, in terms of having a really powerful dam and getting your assets together, et cetera. But I'd be curious, what kind of gets you the most excited about what you're going to be doing next as a museum?
Well, Jane, did you want to say or no? I'm definitely a metadata nerd. So to me, just being able to take a deep dive into what we already have and reuse things. I love that. I was really jealous earlier when Jen Seller at MoMA was talking about their tagging of collection works in exhibition views, because I've spent years working on that, and it's finally mostly done, but really was a manual process. So now that there's tools that can do it, but just to me, being able to kind of connect all of the information that we already have, and then I also really love the idea of being able to connect farther out with other institutions and share information, I think is, definitely something I think is really exciting, because it's sort of deep research about things and browsing. You also end up going down different rabbit holes for things.
Right. Jane, how about you? Oh, you're on mute. How many times have we all said that in the last year? You're on mute.
No. Yeah, I mean, spending the last 10 years, really about it's always about integrating, so that the possibilities of what the future brings is just more, you can be more creative in your outward solutions. I think Neal's talked about different types of assets. I know, we have 36 different sort of applications within the museum, and we still haven't completely integrated our library into so we easily can share more metadata. When we did our open access, it was really important to me. I pushed, if we were going to do it, we needed to always have didactic. We needed to include provenance. We needed to include things that you normally can't even find on someone's site. But if we were going to share these objects, keep the scholarship and, with that, which is very hard for people to accept, except it makes it actually stronger. And so mine, as I said in I do believe we can work, more institutions, small, medium, and big, can work together to create tool sets that more people can use online. And then the other thing, I'm just super excited about this. We had a very encyclopedic conservative museum when I joined, and we're going to do an entire exhibition, a scholarly exhibition with, you know, 2/3 of it being digital. Like, that's crazy, but don't remind them. But it's, you know, like, it's really into making more people come and really understand it. So,
That's good. Yeah, it's great. Neal, now as a solution provider, you know, and you're building this new technology. What gets you the most excited in terms of taking museums into the next generation of tech?
Well, it actually goes exactly with what Jane and Susan said, and it's that modification of our thinking from search to discoverability. The ability for us as researchers or as collaborators or even as our audience to find this stuff and then to start to really discover the new path that goes forward. That's what excites me. The ability to do things, you know, like Jane is talking about and Susan around open link data, so you can start to traverse and see objects and how they're connected between Cleveland, you know, to Paris and then all the way over to Singapore, and start to bring all of those stories together. That's what's exciting, because sometimes we lose the entire story when we only think about a single object. And that's what the technology should bring to us today. For that purpose, that's why I'm really excited about all of it.
Great. We had a question from the audience about funding, which of course, I've seen that come up quite a bit in the chats, of course, and I know the museums that I work with have struggles with that big time. So basically the question is, how do you access funding, in particular for such a holistic approach? I think in the story that you were telling, you know, both Susan and Jane, in terms of how you approach things, it really, everything was connected. And so what's your funding story? Can you share a bit about how you've gotten the money to do this?
Go ahead.
Well, when I came to the museum in 2010, we didn't really even have, I mean, we had, we didn't have a department, we didn't have any application department or any of the things you need to sort of support these systems. We had been given a gift to create Artland's gallery, but I immediately was like, well, how much are we going to have each year to support it? How much will go through infrastructure, how much will go to back end. And that was kind of like, well, they were like, oh, wait, what? Like, and, you know, and honestly, I've spent a lot of energy. I mean, honestly, if it didn't work, I would have been gone, because I put a lot of energy in making sure that my position reports to the is on the executive team, that it's able to update the board on the value of what we've been doing. And even those those dashboards showing how our museum website went down during the pandemic, but our collection website was higher than ever. And that was the year after we launched a big open access. So it's about constantly doing these kind of things, getting our voices out and showing the return on investment. But we really are part of the operating budget. And it wasn't an immediate shift. It's been 10 years that we've iterated on it. But you do, and I mean, I do see questions a lot, like, if a museum doesn't want to invest in a back-end system, what do you do? And I think, don't really do too much digital. I mean, like, you have to kind of take it on, and you can do it in smalls, and you can add on. And we've had great sponsorships and donors who really see us as forward thinking. We do a lot of evaluations and that bring it back to how the visitors are now perceiving us. Our age went from 55 plus, the average age who came to the museum, to, you know, 30, I'm not quoting this right, but family, more late 30s. That was huge. These are things you just have to show results and that it's worth it, because it's hard to say we're going to share the money with digital and technology, but if we're going to be a future museum, it's really not a question anymore. It's just, how are we going to do it within our budget?
I'm glad you mentioned.
I think I'd say that proof of concept is certainly, you know, you want to be able to have something that you're showing people, this is how it's working. This is what you can find in your dams, that kind of thing. And if you are dealing with people who maybe are less interested in thinking, you know, maybe they're thinking digital experiences are sort of more bells and whistles kind of things. I think another good argument is keeping your data integrity is very important. It's part of your collection stewardship to really, know exactly what you've got in your collection, to know the condition that it's in, to know any information that's necessary about maybe how you install it or, that kind of thing. And also rights management if you're licensing any photographs or anything. It's really critical to have all of your ducks in a row for things like that. So that's another sort of more kind of more businessy side, I guess, that you can also use.
Do you mind if I just jump in with one thing? That what the cloud does, it does enable you to try things inexpensively. So instead of having to buy large infrastructure to attempt things in really large projects, you can actually start doing things iteratively, spin things out quickly because you're only paying for the servers for a short period of time, or pay for that AI for a short period of time on a small collection. That's what gets those quick POCs, as Susan talked about, and as Jane mentioned, that you can then show the management team and the donors around it. I also think we have to collectively start thinking about how we approach the foundations. From this, instead of thinking about it as capital investments and instead more operational, and what does that look like? But that's probably a much larger session for another day.
Well, it's interesting you brought up cloud, Neal, because there was somebody who asked about cloud expenses and sort of cloud models and how Jane and Susan, you were, whether you were using the cloud. I know that I've had a couple of museums and also performing arts institutions that I've worked with that have been hesitant to go to the cloud because they feel like the cost is going to keep going up because it's usually priced by volume. And of course, if you're a museum and you have a lot of high resolution imagery, or you're a symphony orchestra and you have a lot of very big audio files, for example, that adds up. So what's your philosophy on that, and how do you approach that? Are you doing everything in the cloud, and how do you predict the cost? Go ahead, Jane.
To me, actually, it's cost effective to kind of go to the cloud because of the management and the security and the duplication. And digitizing our collection has taken years to do, and in the last 10 years, we have photogrammetry and high-res images. So that's something we need. It's a risk assessment of how you want to protect, and you need to sort of state it in that way. The amount of metadata added to these images over the years is, so that's one thing, is sort of figuring out the cost of this collection. Of maintaining a collection, does cost money. The other thing is, again, and I did this, no one was as excited as me, but we had a big patron who loved the museum, thinks it's beautiful, had the collection. And I was like, and he was new, and we were sat at the same table. And I truly showed him all these things. They're only possible if we kind of manage our assets. And he's been a big donor towards our management of cloud assets for our digital assets. I mean, that's what he's done. And he never would have thought that's what he's done. And he's super proud of it. Like, he gets it. So it's about changing. I mean, it's changing minds. I mean, I think there's no secret that nothing's free, but when we do a new exhibition or we do a conservation of an object, I mean, these things, we have to decide, we understand the value there. And I think our position is to really show that it's not a fact, if you don't think about this strategically, it's actually going to cost you more in people, and you could lose it, which is very costly.
I think it's interesting you mentioned donors, because yesterday when I did the pre-conference seminar, I got a question about funding, and I had one instance where a client actually asked me to help pitch dam to a wealthy donor to try to get him to fund the dam. And I had never, for all the business cases I've ever done, I've never pitched to sort of, one really wealthy guy who was a big donor. And but I think with cultural heritage institutions, to your point, people feel very proud to give money to an institution that's promoting art or music or history or one of these things, and it can often work. So it's a nice example.
I would just say, show them the possibility.
Yeah.
Not the dam.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. What's the outcomes, right? What's the outcomes, and what can actually happen? Anything else to add, Susan or Neal, on cloud storage, things like that? Neal probably has a lot to say on that matter, I might imagine.
The only thing I will say is, and Jane, really nailed it really well, so without reiterating it, but when you actually do the cost analysis of all of the IT folks that you need, security, we don't really maintain multiple copies, right? The cloud, by its nature, what's done, it has multiple copies and redundancy in high security areas around it. And then you're benefiting off of, say, like Microsoft's high security availability around that. That's stuff that we can't do on our own. It's very cost prohibitive around it. And so this is the real advantage that you get. And if you were to really do the ROI and look at all of the things, it suddenly becomes very, you actually start to look at it and go, well, actually, that makes a lot more sense. But it's about changing the funding model. I will also, just a little hat tip to David Lipsey. He talks about this in terms of starting to give away the naming rights to the digital elevator, if you will. Around that. And something for us to be thinking about when we approach our donors around this is they're so used to being the donor for an exhibition, but what about that digital elevator to help us go around it? So a little hat tip to David on that one for you.
Yeah,
sorry. Go ahead. No, I was just gonna say we can get a dam named after a donor.
Well, that's exactly it, right? That's exactly right. Yeah.
They only have one dam. Instead, what we do is we have online collection powered by blah blah blah.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of a kind collection wall powered. Like you can pay for that dam and it's cloud and the person maintaining it. If you think creatively.
It's much cooler than having a sports stadium named after you, for sure. We have a question about 3D, which I think would be fun to talk about. So somebody asked, what do you think about the role of 3D imaging as part of the future of digital collections and digital engagement? Maybe Susan, I don't know if you want to tackle that one first, if Guggenheim's doing anything with that.
Yeah. Well, I think we're exploring photogrammetry. It's not really integrated into our systems yet, or it's our toes in the water there, but it's definitely something that I think is it's so amazing what you can do. It's especially for like conservation of objects, but then also just it's kind of fun. It's an interesting way of engaging people in an artwork, is being able to look at all the different sides of it, flip it around, look at it. So I think it's certainly, it's right there. It's here, it's happening, and it needs to be in every museum.
It's another great use of the cloud, actually.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I was just, because it's another great use of the cloud, because the compute that's required to display those objects for you to really do the research on them and look at them takes a lot of GPU power. And so you'd have to buy big machines for this, but instead, if it's in the cloud, you're only using them for those times that you need it. So it's another really good use case of it. And something we're partnering on right now with a partner in 3D technologies.
Yeah, we fully deploy photogrammetry, and this was the year we were gonna, but most our photographers were mostly home, so we worked on other projects, as we all have. But we always do a proof of concept for our 217 installation of the Artland Gallery. Every 3D object we did photogrammetry, and we did some really cool things like mirrors that are very hard, to do, or silver sets, a Bucati tea set. But once we had it, not only is if it was part of our open access, if it met those criterias, and it's part of Sketchfab, which gets it in more repositories, which is also a very easy way to get those things up when you don't have funds. That's a very easy way to do it. But we also then had our interactives where you, gesture-based, could explore an object that was right there, like an Islamic cup that has all this writing on it. You could look at the whole thing, not only in large, but inside, outside, for every object in that space. And so we have found, I mean, to me, we're trying to finish, so we have an image for every part, and like every teacup has a record, I mean, the top and the bottom, but photogrammetry, I think, is really, in so many ways, gives you so much more information, be it a student, a teacher, a scholar, a conservator, etc.
Yeah. So we're out of time. I've been told I have to wrap up. So thank you very much, everyone, for attending. If you didn't get your question answered, please feel free. You can send questions through the platform, or you can send a follow-up email. And here's a toast. You can see I haven't drank much of my glass of wine yet. A toast to all of our great panelists. And thank you, everyone, for attending. And here's to the future of museums. Cheers.
Cheers.
Have a good rest of the conference. Bye.
Cheers.